Let's talk now to Isabel Gutierrez from the Musicians Union. Since the Harvey Weinstein allegations, she's helped set up an anonymous reporting system gathering evidence of the abuse that's happening in the industry. Diane Wagg is here, head of the Music Managers Forum, a respected music manager in the industry. And Helene Lindvall is a former singer, now songwriter, and who is the director of the British Academy of Songwriters. Thank you very much for coming onto the programme. First of all, your reaction to what our investigation has discovered.
It's horrendous. I can't say honestly that I'm surprised, but it's so sad that this is happening.
What about you, Diane?
I think it's absolutely heartbreaking, and I thought that these stories came from the 80s and 90s, and it's really shocking to me, having been in the business for many decades now, to hear this. It's horrible, absolutely shocking.
I agree, and I also think that they're very brave coming out and speaking on camera. I think one of the big reasons why we are where we are is because women are shamed into silence a lot, and I think, you know, I think a lot of people, when they heard the Harvey Weinstein thing, and one of the things in the tape with him when he's saying, "Oh, don't embarrass me, is, you know, a lot of people have been there in that situation where, you know, you're trying to turn somebody down, but you don't want to offend them, because if you offend them,
which
then
is what
something
Chloe was saying in the film.
Something
trying to
bad
vaguely
might happen.
flirt, but you know, keep it sort of light and jolly without hacking him off, because it's her career. You know?
Yeah.
Let me read some messages from people who've been watching Jean's film. This is an email from someone who wishes to remain anonymous. I worked in the music industry as a singer. I was propositioned by a record company executive in my mid-20s. He said if I slept with him, I would get the record deal that was in the process of being discussed with my manager of the time. I didn't take up his offer. I didn't get the record contract. I was devastated and realised someone had taken my destiny in their hands and manipulated it. I wonder, Diane, if you think actually, because of the internet and anyone can put their music online, as we saw with Amy in the film, actually more young people could be targeted by predatory men, in particular in the music industry.
I think that's correct. But I think that's not just the music industry. I think we've got a problem with school children and social media. I think that's right, it's appalling. We're all doing a lot of work towards this, and we were actually addressing this before Me Too and Harvey Weinstein. And I think the good thing about all of this is that it's accelerated this, and everybody's coming out and talking about it. But obviously, from the Music Managers Forum, we represent over 500 managers in the UK. We've got a network, about 2,700 in America. We have a code of practice. We've been through it earlier this year, with a formal complaints procedure. We offer support and advice. We're signposting towards the MU, which is brilliant. And we've also published a health and welfare guide as well. So there's a lot going on, but
I mean, it's so clear, this culture of silence. I wonder, Isabel, you've set up this anonymous reporting system. People are even though it's anonymous, people are still scared, aren't they?
They are still scared, yeah.
And that's really shocking.
It is. And I think it's the reason I would say we've had, you know, the people who've come forward, we're talking 2 figures rather than 3 figures, and I would imagine that barely scratches the surface, honestly. And we've gone out of our way to say we will anonymise cases. If we have someone who comes forward who absolutely doesn't want their case talked about, even in an anonymous fashion, we won't do that. But I think people are still absolutely terrified about what might happen to their careers.
And on the spectrum of the kind of complaints you've received, what sort of things are people saying?
I'd say through the email address at the moment, we've had more on the harassment side than some of the serious things we saw in the film today. They are obviously still incredibly serious cases. I suspect that people who have these really, truly horrendous stories to tell are frightened to put it in email form to anyone, even if it's anonymous. And, you know, we've been dealing with cases like this for our members for a long time, but obviously it takes an awful lot of guts to come forward with something like that. So the cases we have dealt with in the past have been the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure.
Let me read some more messages. When I was 6, I met a very famous singer who started grooming me, and more importantly, my mother, from the minute we first met. Jokes about when you're 14, I will marry you, etc. I also met his children, who were teenagers at the time. When I was 11, he sexually abused me. I screamed at my mother that I never wanted to see him again. Nonetheless, I now have PTSD and I'm freaking out about how to keep my daughters safe. And this is particularly graphic, so if you have children with you, you may not want them to listen to this. Again, it's from somebody who wishes to remain anonymous. When I was 14, I went to see my favourite band with school friends. Our parents would pick us up after. The lead singer of the group would insist that I sit on his lap. His penis would press on me. He begged me for oral sex before we were collected. I heard from other female fans under 16 that he had sex with them and was passing around sexually transmitted diseases, and they couldn't tell anyone for fear. I never performed a sex act on him, as much as he tried and tried. He knew my age and he nicknamed me Jailbait. So,
see,
Oh my gosh.
I think that one of the things that is important, because I've talked to, since this whole Me Too happened, Me Too campaign, I talked to a lot of my male colleagues, and you know, I get reactions from some male colleagues that said, "Thank God now these people are getting their comeuppance." You know, that, you know, they've seen. They kind of say, I know that there are people that are like shaking in their boots at the moment, and good, because these people should. But then I get other people, in particular some of the old school people, that say, well, you know, you got to understand that there are young girls that are throwing themselves at you when you're, what they need to understand, and what I think is so important, why it's to have a code of practice and to explain, is that the reason that we have the laws that we have about age of consent is that these young girls do not understand what they are, you know, that these men are thinking that, oh, you know, she wants to have sex with me. They think that they might kind of like just be in the surroundings of somebody famous, or that they, you know, the parameters are very different. And that's why we have the laws that it's the older person that should refrain. They should not, whatever the younger person.
They shouldn't break the law.
They shouldn't break the law.
Shouldn't break the law,
And you know, we all know stories of you know, artists back when that had, you know, were with 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
but as Diane said, we sort of thought those days had gone. That was, you know, from the 70s and 80s.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that the music managers are the only people in the music business who have a duty of care, and we think that the whole business should have a duty of care. But also that we also think that our artists should be responsible towards their audience. And when I have a young male band, and this just isn't exclusively to women. We've got a really diverse board, and I've had many stories. But we think that I always educate my new artists in terms of how to behave with young fans. You know, they have a responsibility too.
Absolutely. The UK, we invited UK Music, which represents the industry, onto the programme. They were unable to come. They said in a statement, UK Music takes any allegations extremely seriously and will always offer support and confidentiality to any complainant and do our utmost to guide them towards the help and advice they need. Any form of abuse or harassment in the music industry or any other workplace or section of society should never be tolerated. I mean, the people who've got in touch with us today with their experiences, should they go to the police?
I think in some cases they should, absolutely, but I equally understand how some of them feel they're not able to. And that's part of the reason why, as I said, obviously if we had a member come to us with one of these issues, we would guide them through going to the police or whatever, but lots of people don't feel they can. And I think that's why we opened up a kind of anonymous way of just signposting that something has happened to you. And, you know, I suppose we've had people who don't want their stories shared, but they have said, if this particular person gets named in several emails, you know, please come back to me, and maybe, you know, perhaps at that point they would feel
more confident.
I can understand their safety in numbers sometimes.
Yeah. Key, wouldn't it? That would be
absolutely.
I mean, I actually, I'm from Sweden, and in Sweden, the Me Too, that's where the first list from the music industry started, and people have lost some people have lost their jobs. One person is actually up on rape charges. But I think the important thing to remember too, I mean, these are the most grave cases, but it's important that we address the whole kind of the whole spectrum, because I think one of the things that needs to be understood is that in general, for some men as well, but in like more for young women in the industry, and I'm not talking just underage women, just women in their 20s, even early 30s, where anytime we're in a business where you have meetings in unorthodox places. You know, you meet people on tour. You might have a meeting in a hotel. You might have a meeting over dinner. And in general, if you're a male in the industry, it doesn't even cross your mind that you need to be careful in that situation. Yeah. But for women, and what this has kind of brought back to me is when I look back, I've just maneuvered like this in my entire career through my 20s to always, when I'm in a situation alone with a male, that you know, you have to be careful, and it's not right, and we need to do something about it.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming on the programme. Helen Lindvall, now songwriter, director of the British Academy of Songwriters, Diane Wagg, head of the Music Managers Forum, and Isabel Gutierrez from the Musicians Union. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come before 11, Facebook has admitted for the first time that social media can harm your mental health, but are advising people to improve their low mood by, guess what, posting more often.